Welcome to Russ Plays Games. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I've moved some of my game components out of the way for the Sword and Sorcery LP because I wanted to kind of come back and kind of do a few painting videos really fast. Because for me, I have been kind of lax in getting back into painting because I've been doing this and I've had some other things happen in my life, so I've had just some frustrating things. So I'm trying to get back into painting some stuff and doing some things that way. One of the things that I thought about painting, and I'm still considering doing it, this is Dharma. He is the companion to Artemis, the hunter. And so he's a white tiger. And so if you can kind of see on the picture there, and then you can kind of see right there, and he's got kind of a little symbol on his forehead. Like, I'm going to have to really take a look at that and see what that is. What's really interesting is that as a companion, he moves and acts like a normal character within the actual game itself. But as you can see, he only has 3 movement points, and he's got soul rank health points, which means whatever Artemis's soul rank is, that's what his soul rank is. So when you first get him at 2, then he has 2 health points. This is his attack, and then he has bleed 1. And then if you roll 2 lightning bolts during his attack, it triggers this passive ability called On Fall. It says, when triggered, if Artemis is in the same area as Dharma, Artemis may perform an extra weapon attack against the same enemy. Plus, he has 1 magical shield and 2 blue for defense. This is the second version of Dharma. And this is what happens when you get him at 5th rank. And I believe, it's 2 and 5. And so if you get him at those, then you can have a really cool little companion that can kind of go with you. So I thought it might be kind of fun to paint him up to make him into sort of a complement to Artemis. I actually have set up right over here, just off camera. I have set up the beginning of quest number 2. And I'm hoping at some point that I'll get around to continuing that because, and it's not going to be at some point, it'll be some point in the very near future here. I will continue forward with this and continue on, but right now I just thought it might be kind of fun to just kind of throw up some guys and do some painting. One of the things that I wanted to show you, this was some early bones that I bought back when the bones first came out. These are little kobold warriors from Reaper Miniatures Bones line. They came on like a little kind of a plastic stick sprue of about 6 of them, I believe. And the 6th one is in my room. I actually painted him up. I was using him. I love game books, and I bought some Middle-earth game books, and I was using them to kind of move some different things around. I had a little character that I would move around for myself, and then I had to track the enemy movements. I had one of these guys, and then there's like a couple of dice that you use and stuff like that. So there's these 2 that we could definitely take a look at. And like this one has like a little sword and shield. And then this one, which I believe is the same as the other one, has a little sword and a spear. So there's just different things that I can kind of paint and do some stuff with. But I thought what I would do is put the Hero Quest guys on hold for a few minutes. This is a Mordor orc from the Lord of the Rings tradable, or not tradable miniatures game. These are the tradable miniatures game. These are from the actual Games Workshop game. But since I have sort of one of these guys in your hand, actually, let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and paint up. Oh, now come on, you. Get in there. I'm going to go ahead and paint up an elf. And this is how they look. And so I'm going to kind of show how I painted the first one that I did. It's going to be very similar to how we're going to end up painting this one. It's just easier for me, I guess, when I can just kind of do something very simple. And this is going to be very, very simple for me to do. Just because I'm not going to have to sit there and like try to puzzle away and, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? Or how am I going to do that? It's just easier that way. So let me, I need that. So I'm just gathering up some paints that I need. And let me see here. I need gold. Gold. Let's do that gold because I think that gold will work. I need my flesh color. Where's my flesh color? There's my flesh color. Alright. And then, let's see here. What else do I need? Purple. Silver. I need a silvery color. That one might work. If not, I can always reach down and grab my lead belcher. Okay, so the easiest thing to paint right off the bat is the face of our esteemed elf here. And the reason for that is because if you can kind of see with this guy, you can get up in here with the paint. You can get right up inside the helmet there with the paint, and you can actually try to, get up there without having to interfere with anything. So the easiest thing to do right off the bat is we shake up our paints, like always. Okay. And one of the things that you can always do with some of these, if you're trying to get a little bit more detail, sometimes I will take the time to do certain things. I can't remember if I painted. I think I did paint his hands the last time, which I think I'm going to do this time, just because I can. Besides, I think they would actually, especially if they were bowmen, they would probably like to have bare skin rather than gloves. Just because gloves tend to kind of slip. At least that's my experience. I mean, archery. Although I do use one of those three-fingered gloves. You have 1, 2, and 3, and you hold the nocked arrow here, and then you pull the string back with 3 fingers because you have one bent, and so you pull the string back with 3 fingers. I just found that a lot easier for me. Some people find it a little bit easier when they do it that way. Because of the delicate nature of these particular ones, it is so hard times to get it just right. Sorry for the no talking. I am trying to concentrate. I have to be able to get right up to it. So one of the things about painting is if you don't concentrate, stuff can go wrong. It's never fun when stuff goes wrong. So, let me ask you, drop a comment below. What do you think about Emperor Shaddam IV, played by Christopher Walken? I'm meaning to kind of get my audience's opinion on that, since I'm a movie buff too. I absolutely love movies. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. That was kind of an interesting move on Denis' part, that he would cast a guy that, he's a little odd. I was watching through the Batman series the other day, the old original one from the 80s and 90s. And he played Max Schreck. Batman Returns. Another villain-ish. No, he's not the villain, but he is a villain, antagonist. If you have not read Dune, I suggest you go read it and come back and give me your thoughts. Dune is absolutely one of my favorite books of all time. I started reading it when I was a teen, and I have never let up. It was actually just recently starting to read through the Prelude to Dune series by Frank Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. Also known as the House books, because it's House Atreides, House Harkonnen, and House Carino. And actually, kind of interesting, I kind of got done watching, or kind of got done watching Denis Villeneuve's version, and he is. I was actually surprised that Harrison from the 2000 miniseries was the producer of the film. Go back and look at the credits. Harrison was a producer on the film, the Denis version, and I saw many homages, and it wasn't just to Harrison's, but I also saw some homages to Lynch's Dune as well in that movie. So if you know the movies, if you know the miniseries, and you know the movies pretty well, you'll kind of notice that certain shots, certain lines, certain inflections, certain ways the characters stood and moved and everything like that makes it an interesting proposition. One of the first things to do, because this is Apple Barrel and it's not exactly the thickest of most paints, what I tend to do is I'll put this on in sort of an advisory capacity. What I mean by that is I put it on and I make it so that it is sort of an undercoat to what I'm going to do next. Because I'm going to actually what I'm going to do is, after we get done with this particular step, I'm going to get out my darker purple. I'm going to put it over this. And then I will go back and lighten it up with this one. And if you'd want to, I mean, you could technically get away, and I think that's how I did it the first time. You could technically get away with just doing this. But in interests of speeding things up a bit, it might be a little easier to do it that way. It's up to you, however you wish to do it. But what you have to realize is that they have this sort of a ceremonial overcovering that comes around by their head and then comes up under their armpit and then meets back here. They also have this ceremonial sash across the front, and then they have this down the front too. Okay? So when looking at the actual miniature, okay, you can see where I'm starting to do this side over here, and then this is that ceremonial sash that goes around their waist, okay? And so once you get done doing the small stuff, then you can actually switch to the large brush and start going all in on the cape and that kind of stuff. This one's a little bit more difficult because it's harder to see. I did last time. I think I just painted this, and then I think I basically came back over it a couple times just to make sure that I was getting good coverage. And then what I did was, is I then took, let me grab my washes. I then took this Druky Violet and ran it all over the miniature on the purple parts. So I ran it all over the cape, and then I ran it all over the front to give it that depth so that you could really see into it. Then I came back with this purple and like highlighted the outside parts of the cape, And then I think I took some of the purple, some of this amethyst purple metallic, because if you look very carefully at this, it shines. You see how that one shines, whereas the front, I'm talking about these robes here, are very dull comparative to this cape. So that means that there is some kind of a sheen to it. And so to get that sheen, I just took a little bit of this amethyst and just kind of just gave it a nice, just gentle caress so that it had a sparkly quality, but it didn't take away from the miniature, if that makes sense. So now what we're going to do is we are switching up to a bigger brush. And the reason for this is because what we want out of the brush is we want the coverage, okay? We want to get more paint on the brush, and we want that brush to go further, okay? Mostly because as we continue forward with this, you're going to notice that with many of these, when we put this stuff together, we want it to cover, but we also want it to be fairly decent. And as we continue forward with this, I'll say that. It's been a while since I've actually done one of these paint videos. I hope nobody's like, oh god, what's this guy ever going to upload? I'm working on it. Getting there. Okay. One thing I would say to someone, if you are a fan of Frank, but maybe are a little apprehensive about Brian and Kevin's vision of Dune, if you go and you read the Dune Encyclopedia, Ecology of Arrakis section, okay, about Pardo Kynes and him going to Arrakis, how he, saw his vision for the future of Arrakis, etc. And then from there, go read House Atreides. And what you'll find, very fascinating, because I found it fascinating. It's almost identical. And while I agree that with Kevin and Brian, as they have said numerous times, that that the Dune, that the Dune Encyclopedia is not canon, it does show that Willis E. McNally, who edited the document, did have a love of Dune and did see a bit of Frank's notes. Because how else could you have in two separate, disparate things written decades apart have the same story, basically, essentially told, as if it was, well, history? There's only one real explanation, and that's that Willis E. McNally did, in fact, view a few Frank's notes before they sat down to compile and write the Dune Encyclopedia. I say a few because I think Frank changed his notes. One thing, being an author myself, is a lot of times in the creative process, when you're creating a character and you're creating situations for said characters and you're trying to move them around in the world and you're trying to have them do what they need to do, you tend to come up with various ways to get people there. And you have to pick what works best for the story that you want to tell. Not necessarily the story that maybe somebody has in their head. Okay? And while I do think that the Dune Encyclopedia is a good work of fiction, it is just that, a work of fiction. It has nothing to do with the actual events of Dune or anything with it, beyond maybe a few of the historical style autherings where some people, actually used the books themselves or, those types of sources to make their writings. Other than that, there's not really a whole lot that can be said about the Dune Encyclopedia other than it was written by a bunch of college students in creative writing classes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's not Dune. It's not the Dune that Frank Herbert imagined. And although there are some out there that would kind of scoff at me and say, well, you don't really know what you're talking about. Well, I do. And while I'm not Frank Herbert, nor his son Brian, neither is anyone else. And ultimately, Frank left his notes to his son, like it or not. And we just have to accept it. But, if you're one of those purists who only want the books, don't want to be bothered with other things, just want Frank's books, then you don't have to. Just don't deprive us of the enjoyment that we derive from Kevin and Brian's works. As disparate as they may be, because they're written by completely different minds, it's still Dune, deep down at its core. Funny thing is, I was thinking about that as I was just before I sat down to film this video, actually. I was thinking about this because I just had a conversation about this stuff a little while ago on Facebook. And, some of the people in my Dune groups and stuff were like, duh, Frank was the man. Frank knew what he was doing. Yeah, Brian and Kevin, they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, yeah, but see, Frank didn't entrust you with his notes. He entrusted his son because he figured that at some point his son would have enough writing under his belt to be able to succeed him. And he figured that at some point in the future, his son should have the keys to the kingdom. And there's nothing that you, me, or anyone else can do. And the funniest thing is, Lord of the Rings fans talk about Lord of the Rings and various works. They don't ever bemoan Christopher Tolkien, his son, who, J.R. Tolkien's son, who took up the mantle after his father's passing and wrote a ton of literature on the world of Middle-earth. And I mean an absolute metric ton of stuff. Have you ever walked by a section of Tolkien stuff in a Barnes & Noble in a while? Holy crud, is there a ton of literature out there for Lord of the Rings. Histories and biographies and like various things. He wrote volumes based around the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books that his father wrote. And I have yet to hear one person utter that man's name in the same contempt that Dune fans seem to hold Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. I use the term loosely, of course, because, like Star Wars fans, they're a bit on the toxic side. Now, I don't necessarily hold them in that much contempt, because they are fans, and I don't begrudge them wanting something that they can latch on to. But by the same token, they tend to kind of bemoan people like me for liking Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert's stuff. Similar to the way that Star Wars fans right now hate all the Disney stuff. With the exception of a few things. Me, I'm a fan. If it's Star Wars, I'm going to love it. Now, I haven't seen the new Amazon Lord of the Rings show, so I can't comment on that, and I'm not going to. Okay? I have no idea. I mean, you can post your own feelings in the comments below, but just keep it civil, okay? Don't try to bemoan. If somebody likes it and you don't, that's fine. Just say, I'm not a big fan. And leave it at that. Let them have their opinion, you have yours. Keep it civil, okay? If it starts to get too contentious down in the comments below, I'm going to start banning people because I don't want to. I'm not paid to sit and moderate my channel. It's my channel, and if I choose to delete some comments because people are despairing each other, then that's my business. Or if you're despairing me, okay? Other than that, I'm going to keep them up and people can read them and make their own inferences. I don't care. Alrighty, let me stop and then I'll restart and we'll come back and we'll continue on from here. I'll see you in a second. Come back and we'll continue on from, and we're back. So while that was less than a second for you, for me, I just took the time to kind of finish up this cloak. The reason I did that was because I wanted to kind of move on and start getting into some of the more interesting parts of the model. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go and we're going to paint all the gold parts. Okay? This is one of the reasons why I have one of these here, is because these are painted much in the same way. If you look in the literature for the Middle-earth strategy battle game or the Lord of the Rings strategy battle game, you'll see these guys are painted very much in the same way. Okay, these were Sabertooth games. Sabertooth Games was bought by Games Workshop and told cease and desist, which I think was an absolute travesty because, well, damn, this game was awesome. But Games Workshop felt that it was cutting into their bottom line. So they bought the company. They issued the cease and desist. Nothing anyone could do about it, unfortunately. Kind of blows, but what are you going to do, huh? It's the way of things. It's business practices these days, unfortunately. I'm actually kind of glad to see that the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay actually got picked up by Cubicle 7 Games and not Fantasy Flight. I had been considering getting into it, but specialty dice. Ugh. Not a fan. That's not to say that some of their games aren't really, really well done. Like for instance, Warhammer Disc Wars was actually really well done. Facsimile of the actual strategy battle game, or the actual fantasy battle game. And they're living card games have done fairly well. And even Star Wars Destiny. The dice-based card game that they have. It's under the Star Wars license. It's really good. I have a couple of decks. I play with friends every now and then. It's pretty fun. Although, I do have to say, my favorite card game of late has been Final Fantasy, the trading card game. Fun thing about the Final Fantasy, the trading card game, is it was built on Dissidia Final Fantasy, where you have disparate heroes fighting over various things. The thing I love about it is it is very, very easy to learn. It's not that hard to play. Okay, now, one of the things you're going to notice is I actually painted, it's kind of hard to see, but I actually painted this right here, okay, that I'm pointing to. That's the actual band, the actual, it's what actually holds the quiver on his back. The reason why I painted that gold is so that I would remember to come back and paint it a brown color, because I have my little moccasin brown that I'm going to paint a few things with later, and I'm going to make sure that I come back and get that. I just wanted to make sure that I remembered that it was there. And that's one way that I can do that for myself, is to look at it that way and say, aha, there it is. Now, there's a couple ways that you can paint the helmet here. As you can see on this one, the helmet actually has a little bit of kind of hard to see, but right there, and right in there, okay, there's like a little hole, okay? But because the plastic on these is so closed in, you're never going to be able to see that hole, okay? So I just paint the whole thing. Now, if you wanted to, you could leave this little under area where it's very dark, okay? Yeah, this little under area right in there, okay? You could leave it and just leave it black and just not paint it, and it really wouldn't matter. But I find that it is much easier just to paint the stupid thing, and then I don't have to sit there and go, well, now, did I paint that one right? Did I paint this one right? Did this work? Did that work? What did, what didn't? Because it's just easier that way for me. Because then I know the whole thing's painted. Now, what you want to be careful of what you want to be careful of is when you're getting up around the face and you're trying to get up around these little areas right up in here where the edge of the helmet comes and meets the face. Okay, so right in there. Okay, you don't want to do too much because we're going to be putting some of this Seraphim sepia in it, and we're going to try to make sure that we leave enough separation between the two that that you get the impression of the gap without too much of it showing through, if that makes sense. It'll make sense when we get down to it, but basically, unlike on this one, where if you can kind of tell the face, the flesh tone kind of bleeds into the gold and the gold into the flesh tone of both. Now, at a distance on a tabletop, no one's going to notice, okay? And honestly, at the end of the day, I mean, what happens on these small miniatures is that one mistake tends to get magnified. So the more that you think you have something under control and it looks okay, the worse it looks. It's weird how that works, but once you've seen it a couple of times, you kind of go, oh yeah. I'm gonna show you here in a minute. I actually did make a couple of mistakes on the face. And it'll be tough to see in the light, but I think you'll be able to see it well enough that you can go, let me see what you're saying. Because when you have something that's this big and it's 99%, 98, 95% well done, then you'll go, oh yeah. You'll notice it, but it's not as big of a deal. You'll kind of go, oh yeah, okay. But with this, it's Might be hard to see, but basically right up here next to the eye. Okay, I went a little bit too heavy-handed with the brush, and I ended up brushing the orbital socket right above the eye right here. So he's got like a little bit of gold right in here. And the problem is that when somebody picks them up to look at it, that's going to be one of the first things that they see. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that every single time that you paint something, somebody's just going to pick it up and automatically scrutinize it. But it is so noticeable because, you know, they'll look at it and they'll go, oh, wow, there's like gold on the face. And it's just something that will catch their eye because the face doesn't glitter. The helmet glitters, but the face should not be glittering. Okay? That's something we don't want. Just double checking to make sure I should be painting the whole thing. Before I paint it, make a mistake, and then have to repaint it. Which I have done before. We'll end up doing again at some point. I mean, it's inevitable. You're going to make mistakes. You just have to deal with them and move on. And once again, when I'm doing this, a lot of times I'm concentrating because I'm trying to get back into a place where I don't want to get too much paint onto certain parts. I want to make sure that the paint stays where I put it, goes where I put it. Okay. And then probably hear the massive party that's going on in the background. So I'm in an apartment complex, and some people took over the main building, and they're having a ball. And I'm glad that they're having a ball, because it sounds like they are absolutely having fun. Alrighty, and I think I'm going to go ahead and color wouldn't it? I'm going to color the quiver in gold. Now, we have to be very, very careful because we don't want the paint to be on his robe. So we have to be very careful about how we get the paint where it needs to go. Now there is a ribbon on here which I'm going to paint a different color. This I'm just on the color I'm going to paint it in. But I'm going to paint it a little bit different color because I want it to be different and look different. You can paint it however you want to. As the immortal Bob Ross would say, it's your world. You do it how you want it. Just checking the time. Just checking the time. Okay. I think that's good enough for now. Alright. So, next thing we're going to paint. There's a couple things we can do. But I think first, what we're going to do is we're going to paint chainmail. Now on this one, it's more of like that mithril silver style thing. But, again, this is your world. You can paint it how you want. Okay. And mine are going to be a little bit different just because I want my guys to look a little bit different on the battlefield. When I see them and how they look in relation to each other. If you remember, Evangeline Lily's name offhand. Her character, her words to Thranduil. I did not think you would allow your son to marry a lovely Sylvan Elf. So I would think that these guys would have a little bit less in terms of their materials, maybe. Who knows? You can always create a story for each one of your elves as you paint them. It doesn't matter. Even if you're painting a batch of elves, come up with a story for why they act the way they act. Why do they do the way they do? Why do they look the way they look? Okay? You can make them however you want to make them because they're your figures. Okay? When you purchase them, they're yours. Do with them as you please. No one is going to tell you any different. And if they do, well, then you can send them over here and I will tell them to go fuck off. And I say that with the utmost sincerity. Okay? They're yours. You do you. Okay? So now we're going to paint the we're going to paint up our little Bowman's bow here. And we're going to be ready to go. Now, the thing is, from what I've seen in most gaming circles, once you've pretty much finished this step, right here, you painted up the bow, you've pretty much painted the whole damn character, you could take this guy to a tabletop and he'd probably be better than about 90% of everything out there. Okay? The rest of it is where we get into the technical steps, and I think what we'll do is after I get done with this, is we're going to sit down and we're going to kind of go through some of those technical steps once more, so that you guys can understand how to do it. So if you choose to follow along, you'll have a beautifully painted miniature, and if not, you'll still have a beautifully painted miniature. Don't let anyone tell you different. Just remember that when you look across the table at their unpainted miniature and they're telling you, "Ugh, it looks hideous," go, really? Mine looks hideous? I'm joking, of course. I remember I used to sit there and when I was first playing Warhammer 40k, I'd see people sitting there and they would have they would just have black, maybe a bit of flesh tone here and there. And it was like, serious? I hadn't started to play yet, but I was determined that I was never, ever, ever going to have figures look that hideous on my tabletop. So either they're unpainted, or I paint them. Either one. Because I am hell damned if that's going to happen. Now you're probably wondering where I got these figures. Well, let me tell you. From the original Fellowship of the Ring set from 2002. And I say from 2002 because that's when the game premiered. Came out in early 2002, just after the first movie dropped. And a lot of people didn't really understand at the time what, like how big the game was going to get. And it really kind of pushed the boundaries of what people knew. And the funny thing is, I didn't know this. An earlier version based on both the books and the Ralph Bakshi version of the movie. They had released some miniatures based on those. So like the Balrog and like a bunch of other figures they had released based on a lot of these. And so like figures like Sauron and a few others, they had released. Now, you can find them. They're expensive as hell, but you can find them. If you search, basically, Games Workshop, Lord of the Rings, strategy battle game, miniatures on eBay, you can find a ton of miniatures for this game, but you can also find a ton for the game that was out in the mid '80s. And they're fascinating to look at. They are pretty awesome looking. And I believe that, like, if you could find, say, Gandalf the Grey, you could probably use him in the game, because here again, it's just a representation. It doesn't have to be the actual figure that the people have. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be all that stuff. You do you. You get what you want, and you make it how you want it. I'm gonna paint the fletching. I'm gonna paint a little ribbon in this reddish color. Come here, you. And that would mark the Legion. So you always come up with little stories. Why they're doing what they're doing. What they're doing. It's always fun. Just come up with little stories. So I'm not actually going to be playing these guys, so I don't really come up with too many stories for them. But, for instance, if I do something with, say, my warlord characters, I tend to come up with stories for them. Because I really do love Warlord. I think it's an underrated gem. Still trying to get my friends to become a part of it. If you're watching this, guys, you play. It's easy and it's fun. I would love to do a Warlord 3rd edition. And a lot of people are probably going, Warlord 3rd edition? Was there even a 2nd edition? Why, yes, there was. I think it made too many radical departures from 1st edition. I think a lot of people kind of went, huh? What? What? I don't get it. Does not make sense. And so, come back to that in a second. I just want to get the boots really fast, and then I'll end this episode. And then when we come back, we'll start in on the actual finite details. And then probably pick another figure and keep going. I might pick up the Barbarian and keep on going with him. But basically, what I also wanted to show you here was, if you're going to do, I use this moccasin brown color for different details, but basically when I said earlier that I had painted that one gold because I was going to come back and do it again, this is what I meant. See, if you paint it just right, then it makes it look pretty good. And so we paint his boots in the same color. And so this has been Russ for Russ Plays Games. And I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial of mine. I know it's a little different than some of the ones in the past, but I kind of wanted to show how you could sit down and paint a figure fairly quickly. I'm not the world's best speed painter, but I'm not exactly the world's worst speed painter either. So keep it locked here. We will come back on the next episode and I will be showing off the finishing touches on this guy, and then you know, how you can kind of paint him well, and then from there we will go and finish. And then, like I said, we'll probably pick up and finish this guy. And then when we get done with that, we will go forth and just continue on. And like I said, if you want to see me paint Dharma here, so that when he makes an appearance here in the next, well, probably adventure or two, as soon as I get enough soul points necessary to jump Artemis here up to soul rank 2, Dharma will be joining us. So I'm probably going to try to get him painted before then. So if you want to see him, drop a comment below. So smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think of my paint series so far. Let me know what you think of some of my other Let's Plays. And I will see you on the next one. Have a wonderful day.